The following content has been generated with artificial intelligence under minimal human supervision. The data presented may contain errors or inaccuracies. The opinions expressed in this content do not necessarily reflect the vision, position, or values of Digi-all. We recommend verifying critical information with additional sources before making decisions based on this content.
Welcome to Digi-all Tech News. Today is Thursday, July 9th, 2026. I'm Kylie Brooks, and this is where technology becomes clear and engaging. China is preparing to let top AI firms buy a tightly limited batch of Nvidia H200 chips, easing a compute shortage without abandoning its domestic chip push. China has warned that Anthropic's Claude Code carried a serious backdoor risk, while Anthropic says the disputed mechanism was built to defend against model distillation. OpenAI is opening access to its GPT 5.6 models and rolling out GPT-Live voice systems after an earlier government-requested limit on release. Meta's new Muse image model lets people remix public Instagram posts into AI images by default, unless account holders opt out. Meta is building a 1-gigawatt AI data center in Alberta, turning Canada's energy advantage into the next front in the infrastructure race. Let's start with the chip story, because this is less a clean reopening than a carefully rationed pressure valve. Chinese officials have told Alibaba, ByteDance, and DeepSeek that approval to buy Nvidia H200 AI chips could come soon, after Washington had already cleared Nvidia to sell the chips into China and licensed roughly 10 Chinese firms for purchases. But the proposed supply is still narrow. Allocation is being finalized, and people familiar with the discussions put the possible total below 200,000 chips overall, less than half of what the companies had requested earlier this year. That matters because Chinese AI developers are facing an acute compute shortage after US export controls and Beijing's self-reliance drive effectively pushed Nvidia's market share in China to zero. The trade-off is pretty clear. Beijing can ease near-term bottlenecks for its strongest AI companies, while still keeping pressure on the market to build domestic alternatives. So the listener question is not simply whether Nvidia is back in China. It is whether this limited access buys time, or just underlines how scarce top-tier compute has become. Now this is where a cybersecurity alert becomes a geopolitical story very quickly. China's Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, through the CNVDB threat platform, warned that Claude Code versions 2.1.91 through 2.1.196 could send sensitive user information, including location and identity, to a remote server without consent. Those versions were released between April 2nd and June 29th, and users were told to uninstall or upgrade. Anthropic's site listed version 2.1.2.04 as current as of Wednesday. Anthropic's response adds the twist. It says the so-called backdoor was an experiment earlier this year to protect against distillation attacks, and it repeated that entities majority owned by China-headquartered organizations are not allowed to use its tools. The timing sits inside a wider fight. Anthropic recently accused Alibaba of trying to distill its capabilities. Many developers in China have been bypassing restrictions to reach US AI tools, and Alibaba told employees to stop using Anthropic tools for work starting July 10th. In practical terms, coding agents are not casual chatbots. They can touch code bases, credentials, internal workflows, and developer machines. So whether you see this as a vulnerability warning, an enforcement mechanism, or a front in US-China AI tensions, the operational lesson is the same. Teams using autonomous coding tools need version control, policy control, and a clear answer for where sensitive data can go. OpenAI's release schedule is moving from restricted access to broad distribution. Today, Thursday, July 9th, the company is publicly releasing its GPT 5.6 series, Sol, Terra, and Luna. In June, access had been limited to a small group of trusted partners at the US government's request, and Sam Altman signaled the broader rollout late Tuesday with a simple post on X, "Happy building." Following that, OpenAI began rolling out GPT-Live globally to ChatGPT users on Wednesday, including GPT, Live 1 and GPT Live 1 Mini, designed to listen and speak in real time so interactions feel more like natural conversations. Here's the key context. OpenAI describes Soul as its strongest model yet, with enhanced capabilities in coding, biology, and cybersecurity, which are exactly the kinds of domains that make governments nervous. President Donald Trump's June executive order asks developers to voluntarily share cutting-edge models with the government for capability assessments before full release, while agencies get 60 days to build an evaluation framework. The bigger question is how to make that process repeatable without turning temporary government review into a permanent bottleneck. Broad access helps developers, enterprises, cyber defenders, and partners move faster, but the strongest models also raise the stakes for testing before everyone gets the keys. Meta's Muse. Image launch is a reminder that the AI privacy debate is increasingly about defaults. The model, introduced by Meta Superintelligence Labs on July 7th, is being woven into Instagram, starting in the United States, and public accounts are automatically included. That means another user can tag a public profile in a Meta AI prompt and generate images that remix that person's public photos and videos. Meta frames the feature as a way to personalize creations for invitations, shared concepts, or graphics. But the important user impact is the burden shift. If you do not want this, you have to go into Instagram's sharing and reuse settings and turn off the options for posts and reels, or switch the account to private. Existing AI-generated images using your content are not removed, and Instagram's help language says users do not get notifications when this happens. That matters because public does not always mean freely reusable in every new context. The trade-off is between creative convenience and meaningful consent, and Meta has chosen an opt-out system that asks users to discover the setting before their likeness and content are remixed. And finally, Meta's AI ambitions are getting a very physical footprint in Canada. The company says it is building a 1-gigawatt AI-optimized data center in Sturgeon County, Alberta, at a cost of about $9 billion, with construction expected to take 2 to 3 years. It would be Meta's 33rd data center globally, and Alberta was chosen for abundant energy resources, a favourable regulatory climate, existing industrial zoning, and room for additional power infrastructure. Meta worked ahead of the announcement with partners including Greenlight Limited Partnership, Altalink, Capital Power, and the Alberta Electric System Operator. In practical terms, this is the infrastructure side of the AI race. Models need power, cooling, land, grid coordination, and local permission. Meta is also developing a cloud computing business that could use excess capacity or host third-party AI models, even as investors question a 2026 capital spending forecast of up to $145 billion. The market pressure is visible. Meta's stock is down roughly 9% year to date, while the Nasdaq is up 11%. The project could employ more than 3,000 construction workers at peak and includes local infrastructure investments and non-profit funding. But community concerns around emissions, water use, and noise are already part of the broader data center conversation. So the Alberta bet is not just where Meta builds, it is how much local infrastructure, investor patience, and public trust the AI build-out will require. Today's through line is control. Who controls scarce chips, coding tools, frontier model releases, public images, and the power infrastructure behind AI? The technology is moving quickly, but every story today comes back to the same practical question. What do we let scale by default, and where do we require a real checkpoint? Thank you for staying informed with Digi-all Tech News. We'll be back with more updates as they develop.